Welcome the chosen few, those forged in the crucible of adversity. A whispered lie can race across continents, but truth is a marathon runner, its breath steady, its gaze unwavering. Let this truth settle deep within you, for what you are witnessing is the inexorable endurance of truth itself. They believed their fleeting slander could outpace your character, that they could craft a caricature of you in the minds of others, a grotesque distortion of your very essence. But lies, like fragile orchids, require constant tending, while truth, like a mighty oak, draws strength from its own roots. The upkeep of falsehood is an exhausting endeavor. Psychological studies reveal that maintaining a lie demands significantly more cognitive energy than simply speaking honestly. Consequently, liars invariably succumb to burnout, stumble over their own fabrications, and ultimately contradict themselves. The very circle they sought to manipulate has begun to discern the pattern, to understand that if one among them, even the most innocent, can be subjected to such unwarranted aggression, then no one within that circle is truly immune. The wolf, once applauded for its cunning, now appears alarmingly ravenous. The irony is almost palpable. They boasted of exposing you. Yet it is their own inconsistencies, their own simmering bitterness, and their own twisted narratives that are being laid bare before the very audience they attempted to turn against you. It's akin to watching someone ignite their own dwelling in an attempt to harm you, only to discover too late that they remain trapped within the inferno. And life, with its sardonic humor, often orchestrates such scenarios. Isn't it a delicious twist that the very voices that once echoed their lies are now murmuring doubts against them? The chorus of laughter that accompanied the defamation of your name is now replaced by furtive glances directed at the liar, a silent interrogation hanging in the air. Wait a second, what else have they been fabricating? This is not merely a turn of the tables, it's a seismic shift. It's a violent upheaval. For when innocence is targeted, the universe in its intricate and unfathomable way ensures that the liar's own inner circle becomes the instrument of their downfall. Today we delve into the unvarnished reality of why their deceptions have not only backfired but have rebounded with a force that has left them reeling. And believe me, the unraveling is about to become exceptionally satisfying. One lies. Cultivate suspicion, not loyalty. Lies by their very nature erode trust and foster an atmosphere of suspicion, which is precisely why the architect of these falsehoods now observes their own coterie, turning away, their hearts hardening. Initially, their pronouncements may have carried an air of conviction. Perhaps they delivered their lies with practiced ease, even conjuring a fabricated tear or reciting a carefully rehearsed narrative. People listened, nodded in agreement, and some were even swayed by the deception. But belief is ephemeral. It does not equate to genuine trust. Trust is painstakingly constructed over time, and lies inherently lacking a solid foundation cannot support it. The insidious aspect of lying is that it casts a permanent shadow. Once an individual demonstrates a willingness to distort the truth about one person, the inevitable question arises in the minds of all those around them: could I be the next target? This seed of doubt is poisonous. It does not blossom into loyalty, it metastasizes into suspicion. Even those who initially championed the lie are now quietly assessing the potential repercussions of aligning themselves too closely with someone who weaponizes dishonesty. And here's the stark truth: when someone engages in deception, they may believe they are controlling the narrative, but in reality, they are broadcasting a warning signal about their own character. Their inner circle may refrain from publicly challenging them, but behind closed doors, they are observing, analyzing. They are meticulously documenting every inconsistency, every embellishment. Each time the story undergoes a revision, loyalty begins to crumble, not because the circle suddenly embraces you, but because they cease to trust the liar. No one willingly stands behind an individual who might ultimately betray them with the same treacherous blade. The lie they propagated about you may have enjoyed a boisterous beginning, but its conclusion will inevitably be far less triumphant. People instinctively compare the fabricated narrative with the lived reality. They observe your actions, your character, your unwavering consistency, and the dissonance between the two becomes glaringly apparent. And when the puzzle pieces refuse to align, fingers point back to the one who fabricated the distorted image. That is the moment when the inner circle begins to whisper, to doubt, to question. The liar who once exuded an aura of power now appears menacing, unstable, and utterly unreliable. That is the instant loyalty dies, because loyalty demands security, and there is no safety in the company of someone who readily destroys reputations for their own amusement. Their circle is fracturing because they have grasped the obvious. If this individual could so brazenly fabricate lies about an innocent person, then no one is safe from becoming the next victim. Ultimately, their lies did not construct an empire. They cultivated suspicion, and suspicion invariably dismantles the house from within. 2. An assault on innocence reveals hidden darkness. When innocence is assaulted, the darkness lurking within the attacker is invariably brought to light, which is why their own circle is now experiencing unease. When an individual fabricates lies about someone who is genuinely blameless, it does more than simply besmirch the target. It exposes the inherent corruption within the liar's own heart. Innocence possesses a unique and potent power. It does not require amplification. It does not necessitate retaliation. It simply stands as irrefutable evidence of purity, and that purity acts as a spotlight, illuminating the malice of the attacker with excruciating clarity. The ferocity of their attack only served to underscore the fact that the issue was never about you. It stemmed from a deep-seated brokenness within them. The reality is that most people can tolerate flaws, mistakes, and even vulnerabilities in others. However, what they cannot abide is witnessing gratuitous cruelty directed towards someone who has done nothing to warrant such treatment. There is an unwritten law deeply ingrained in human nature: injustice creates profound discomfort. Their circle may have initially chuckled or nodded in agreement as the lies were disseminated, but over time that laughter turned bitter. Deep within their conscience, a voice whispered, "This feels wrong." That is the persistent pull of conscience, and it does not relinquish its hold easily. By targeting you, they revealed their own jealousy, their own pent-up bitterness, and their own gnawing insecurity to the very people they sought to manipulate. The inner circle begins to perceive that the animosity is not solely directed at you. It is indicative of this person's overall operating style in life. They witnessed the venom, the exaggeration, the desperate need to tear someone down, and it prompted them to question what other dark tendencies might be lurking within that individual's spirit. That type of darkness cannot be contained. It inevitably permeates every relationship. The irony is that their intention was to diminish you, but instead they magnified their own ugliness for all to see. Innocence does not weaken under attack, it becomes amplified. While they were preoccupied with portraying you as the villain, their own actions became the true focus of the narrative. Their circle now feels uneasy in their presence because what once appeared to be strength is now exposed as cruelty, and cruelty, when seen in its true form, is never respected. It is feared, avoided, and ultimately rejected. In the end, their attempt to attack you transformed into a mirror for everyone around them. Their circle is now gazing into that reflection and confronting a disturbing truth. The individual who targeted the innocent is the one who cannot be trusted. Their darkness is no longer concealed. It is the only attribute people perceive. 3 lies cannot withstand the test of time. Lies invariably unravel with the passage of time, which is precisely why their narrative about you is collapsing before the very eyes of their inner circle. Initially, a lie can appear convincing. It is captivating, sensational, and attention-grabbing, prompting people to embrace it without question. However, as time elapses, reality inevitably exposes the inherent flaws. The fundamental problem with lying is that it demands constant updates, constant maintenance, and a constant performance to sustain its believability. And regardless of how adept an individual believes they are at deception, it is impossible to maintain consistency in every detail indefinitely. Eventually, fragments of the truth seep through the cracks, and the lie begins to decompose. What makes this even more damaging for them is that time has worked in your favor. While they were expending their energy desperately trying to hold their fabricated story together, your consistent character has been quietly disproving their claims. Lies may initially spread rapidly, but they lack the staying power of truth. People begin to observe that your character has remained steadfast. Your actions do not align with the accusations leveled against you, and your spirit does not reflect the ugliness you were accused of embodying. This presents a significant problem for the liar because the longer time passes, the more difficult it becomes to rationalize why their story does not align with the reality others are witnessing, and their circle takes notice. People are not as easily deceived as liars may believe. When someone incessantly defames the same individual, yet reality contradicts their claims, suspicion begins to grow. They begin to reevaluate past conversations, recalling details that seemed inconsistent. They recognize that the tone was invariably bitter, excessively exaggerated, and more driven by emotion than factual evidence. And once these questions begin to coalesce, it is only a matter of time before loyalty begins to erode. The fundamental truth about lies is that they have an expiration date. They may decompose slowly, but once they turn rancid, the stench becomes impossible to mask. Their circle is now detecting the foul odor of decay. They are realizing that what they were fed was never truth, but a carefully crafted performance intended to manipulate their emotions. And because truth requires no elaborate explanation while lies necessitate constant defense, the liar is now exhausted, cornered, and exposed. Ultimately, their pronouncements about you could not withstand the test of time. They aged poorly, disintegrated, and ultimately cast the liar as a fraud. Their words lost their potency while your quiet consistency gained considerable weight. And now the very circle they once used to disseminate the lie is now questioning why the story never aligned with the reality they are currently witnessing. 4. Their attack became a mirror reflecting their own flaws. Their assault truly served as a mirror for everyone else. And that is the precise moment their circle began to awaken to the truth. By designating you as the scapegoat, they not only exposed their animosity towards you, but they also revealed their entire pattern of manipulative behavior. People are more perceptive than liars give them credit for. Once the initial dust settles, their circle begins to connect the dots. They realize that what was done to you was not simply an isolated incident. It was a demonstration of how this person treats anyone who dares to outshine them, to stand too tall, or to challenge their authority. Suddenly, the attack is no longer viewed as an isolated event, but as a foreshadowing of what could befall them if they ever deviate from the prescribed path. This is where fear begins to creep in. The very individuals who once applauded the spectacle now begin to ask themselves a series of private questions. What will happen if I achieve something they desire but cannot attain? What will happen if I refuse to comply with their demands? Will they turn on me as well? That realization does not foster loyalty. It breeds apprehension and a desire for distance. No one desires to live under the perpetual threat of becoming the next target, so people begin to withdraw. They smile less frequently. They share less information. They trust less readily. They begin to scrutinize every word, every action, not out of respect, but out of self-preservation. However, fear can only bind people together for so long. Once fear supplants trust, relationships begin to decay from the inside out. Distance widens, and that distance ultimately transforms into betrayal. The very individuals who once believed the lies begin to whisper in hushed tones, secretly warning one another, secretly plotting their escape, because the truth is no one desires to remain in close proximity to someone who thrives on scapegoating. Sooner or later, the circle realizes that standing too close to this individual is inherently dangerous. If they were willing to sacrifice an innocent person to advance their own agenda, then they would not hesitate to sacrifice anyone else. And that is their ultimate downfall. By attacking you, they unwittingly revealed the trap they had set for themselves. Their circle is not merely turning against them because of what was done to you. It is turning because they have glimpsed their own bleak future should they choose to remain. What was intended to destroy you has become a stark warning sign for everyone else. The mirror has reflected their true nature, and the reflection is undeniably repulsive. 5. Innocence elicits judgment. Innocence in its quiet power invariably elicits judgment, a dynamic often underestimated, until it unfolds before our very eyes. You are not compelled to engage in heated debates to plead your case or to defend yourself, because innocence requires no advocate. It speaks volumes on its own. When an individual possesses a pure spirit and a clean heart, that very purity transforms into a formidable weapon, one they did not even seek. It unsettles the guilty. It makes the dishonest feel exposed and vulnerable. It weighs heavily on the conscience of anyone who stood idly by or actively participated in the attack. That is why their circle is now experiencing such unrest. It is not your carefully chosen words that haunt them. It is the sheer weight of your unwavering innocence. The reality is that people can readily dismiss flimsy excuses. They can twist facts to suit their purposes, and they can even conveniently disregard blatant evidence when it aligns with their personal biases. But what they cannot easily dismiss is the palpable presence of purity. A clean soul exudes an undeniable authority even without uttering a single word. It matters not how loudly the liar shouts or how excessively they embellish their narrative. Their voice invariably grows weaker in the shadow of unwavering truth. Their circle feels this undeniable truth even if they consciously resist acknowledging it. They sense the inherent imbalance, the spiritual wrongness of attacking someone who harbors no malice. That inherent awareness stirs division within the ranks because some cannot comfortably reconcile their complicity in an act of profound injustice. And here is a deeper, more profound truth: innocence is not a passive force. It possesses an inherent power of its own. It judges without resorting to condemnation. It reveals without resorting to accusation. It simply stands, and in that unwavering stance it unmasks the true nature of everyone else. Their circle is now left to grapple with the weight of their own conscience, and the burden is crushing. Some experience intense feelings of guilt, others feel overwhelming shame, and still others are consumed by a pervasive fear because deep down they recognize that they sided with corruption against someone who was utterly blameless. That guilt does not simply dissipate, it festers and ultimately transforms into disunity. This is precisely why you were not compelled to defend yourself. Your unwavering consistency, your unimpeachable character, your unshaken spirit. All of these qualities have served as your most potent defense, and it is far more effective than any counterattack you could have launched. Innocence does not merely clear your name. It shakes the very foundations of theirs. It diminishes the liar, revealing their inherent weakness and desperation. And now their own circle is deeply divided, not because of anything you actively did, but because your purity stood tall in the face of their corruption, forcing everyone to confront the truth about who truly carries the weight of truth. 6. Loyalty founded on hatred inevitably backfires. Loyalty that is built upon a foundation of hatred invariably backfires, and that is the precise snare they stumbled into when they attempted to rally their circle against you. Their entire bond was not predicated on respect, trust, or even genuine affection. It was fueled by a shared desire to tear you down. That particular brand of unity may feel empowering in the moment, because nothing unites people more swiftly than a shared enemy. But the truth remains that hatred lacks staying power. It is akin to a raging fire that burns intensely but quickly consumes itself, leaving only ashes in its wake. Their circle may have felt united as long as your name was being dragged through the mud, but the moment the obsessive focus on you began to wane, they were left staring at one another with nothing but suspicion and simmering resentment. That is the hidden danger inherent in hate-fueled loyalty. It requires constant replenishment. They had to continually fabricate new lies, conjure new reasons to despise you, generate new drama to keep their circle engaged. But hatred is an exhausting emotion. Eventually the fuel runs out, and when it does, the same corrosive energy they once directed at you turns inward, consuming them from within. The circle begins to bicker amongst themselves, accusing one another and engaging in relentless competition for dominance. The loyalty they once swore by implodes because it was never genuine in the first place. It was merely borrowed energy derived from tearing you apart. And here is the brutal, unvarnished truth. Anyone who relies on a scapegoat to maintain cohesion within their circle is already inherently weak and insecure. If their bond were truly strong and resilient, they would not have needed you as the binding agent. The very fact that they made you the centerpiece of their unity exposed the deep cracks in their foundation. Now those cracks are widening, threatening to bring the entire structure crashing down. Without you to focus, their attacks upon their insecurities are now turning against one another. The envy that was once directed outward is now festering inward, poisoning their relationships and tearing their circle apart from the inside. This is precisely why their malicious plan was doomed to fail from the very beginning. Hatred cannot build anything that will endure. It can only destroy. What they mistook for power was in reality a profound fragility disguised as strength. The circle is now devouring itself because the adhesive that bound them together was never love or respect. It was venom, and venom invariably poisons the hand that wields it. By attempting to unite people against you, they inadvertently guaranteed that the moment you were no longer available as a target, their so-called loyalty would dissolve into utter chaos. Now they are reaping the bitter consequences of building a bond on something that was never meant to last. 7. Their own circle secretly harbored envy towards you. Their own circle secretly harbored envy towards you, a brutal truth often hidden beneath the surface of malicious gossip and carefully constructed lies. The lies did not spread so easily merely because the liar was so convincing. They spread because the people listening desperately wanted them to be true. It was easier for them to believe the worst about you than to confront the uncomfortable reality that you possessed qualities they lacked. Envy operates in subtle, insidious ways. It does not always manifest as overt hatred. Sometimes it disguises itself with false smiles, polite conversations, or even the deafening silence of those who claim to be neutral. Deep down, however, they were secretly hoping for your downfall, because your very existence served as a constant reminder of their own perceived inadequacies. That is why the lies initially took root so easily. They provided the circle with a convenient excuse to avert their gaze from their own insecurities. By clinging to the belief that you were not as pure, as gifted, or as strong as you appeared to be, they felt a little more comfortable with themselves. The lie offered them a sense of relief, however temporary, because it effectively diminished you in their minds. And let's be honest, sometimes people don't require concrete proof to believe a scandalous story. They simply need a compelling reason that feeds their simmering jealousy. You were that reason, but now the carefully constructed facade is beginning to crumble. The more time passes, the more evident it becomes that the fabricated narrative does not align with the undeniable reality. Your consistent character is undeniable. Your unwavering spirit has not matched the vile accusations leveled against you, and the tangible fruits of your life stand in stark contrast to the lies they so readily embraced. That is precisely where the agonizing feelings of guilt begin to creep in. Not only guilt for siding with the liar, but also guilt for secretly desiring those lies to be true in the first place. They are now realizing that they were not merely passive listeners. They were active participants, silently rooting for your downfall because of their own deep-seated envy, and guilt is an extraordinarily heavy burden to bear. It does not simply sit passively. It actively shifts the power dynamics within their circle. the circle is now turning against the liar because they can no longer bear the constant reminder of their own petty jealousy. Every time they look at the individual who propagated those lies, the liar's exposure forces them to confront the disturbing truth about themselves, and that level of discomfort is simply unbearable. So what inevitably transpires, they redirect the blame, shifting it away from themselves. Instead of acknowledging their own envy, they pin everything on the liar who provided them with a convenient outlet for their suppressed feelings. They turn against the very person who gave them the excuse to indulge in their jealousy. Not out of any newfound loyalty to you, but out of sheer desperation to escape the unflattering reflection of their own weakness staring back at them. In the end, their own envy made them complicit in the attack, but the unraveling of the lies has left them thoroughly exposed. In a desperate attempt to salvage their own reputations, they are abandoning the liar not out of loyalty to you, but out of a primal urge to escape the haunting mirror of guilt that confronts them at every turn. 8. Fabricated testimonies always demand corroboration. Fabricated testimonies invariably demand corroboration, and that is the very pitfall into which the liar blindly stumbled. When they disseminated their lies about you, they likely believed that their words alone would suffice to sway public opinion. Perhaps their initial efforts met with some degree of success. Some nodded in agreement, some whispered their malicious gossip to others, and some even enthusiastically embraced the fabricated narrative. But lies are inherently fragile things, incapable of standing on their own. Unlike truth, which can simply exist without any external validation, lies necessitate backup and independent verification. They require concrete evidence to support their claims. They need at least one other person to stand alongside the liar and declare, "Yes, I witnessed it too, just as they described." Without such corroboration, the entire house of cards begins to wobble precariously. The irony is that the more they exaggerated their claims, the more their own circle began to lean forward, silently demanding tangible proof to support such outrageous allegations. People may play along for a while, but human nature inherently seeks factual receipts, and when no such evidence materializes, suspicion begins to shift from the accused to the accuser. Suddenly, the individual who is pointing the finger of blame appears more desperate and less convincing. The louder they proclaim their accusations, the more obvious the emptiness behind their words becomes. And that is the inherently dangerous element of false testimony. It inevitably redirects the spotlight back onto the liar. The moment they are unable to produce any credible witnesses, their credibility begins to fracture and crumble. Their circle begins to take notice of the glaring inconsistencies in their story. The various details do not align in a coherent manner. The story changes subtly over time, and the speaker's emotional tone sounds increasingly personal and vindictive rather than factual and objective. What initially seemed like righteous anger now appears to be nothing more than simmering bitterness. What once seemed like a noble effort to expose hidden truths now reveals itself as an attempt to expose the liar themselves. Innocence does not require an elaborate defense team because reality will invariably reveal the truth, but lies, when devoid of any supporting evidence, begin to rot from the inside out. And when they do, the accuser does not merely appear mistaken. They appear calculating, manipulative, and even malicious. They appear to be the one who is actively concealing something from public view, and people within their circle begin to whisper not about you, but about them, questioning their true motives and wondering what they are trying so desperately to hide. If none of this is actually true, why did they go to such extreme lengths to destroy your reputation? What is their real motivation for such a vicious attack? That is how false testimony ultimately flips the script. The liar becomes the one on trial at the end of the day. Their attempt to frame you has ultimately ended up framing themselves. The conspicuous absence of any supporting evidence becomes its own kind of proof that envy, bitterness, and a calculated desire to manipulate others were the driving forces behind the entire smear campaign. So to bring it all together, remember, this truth has a way of surfacing even when buried beneath layers of deceit. What we've seen is that targeting someone's innocence ultimately backfires, revealing the darkness within the attacker and dismantling the very foundation of their lies. The principles of truth, authenticity, and consistent character will always win in the end. I truly hope this has offered you some insight, and maybe even a bit of encouragement. If anything resonated with you, or if you have your own experiences to share, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Let's start a conversation and support each other. And if you enjoyed this exploration of truth and resilience, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. We'll be diving deeper into topics like this, and I'd love to have you along for the journey. Long for the journey, long for the journey, long for the journey, long for the